10-year-old Max Henderson pressed his nose against the cold glass of the animal shelter window, his breath fogging up the surface as he gazed at the rows of kennels inside. It was a crisp October morning, and the autumn leaves crunched beneath his worn sneakers as he shifted from foot to foot with barely contained excitement. "Remember, Max," his mother Sarah said gently, placing a warm hand on his shoulder, "we're just looking today. Your father and I haven't made any final decisions yet." But Max wasn't really listening. His heart had already been stolen the moment he'd seen the flyer posted on the community bulletin board at Miller's grocery store 3 days ago. "Adopt a friend," it had read in cheerful yellow letters, with pictures of dogs and cats who needed homes. He'd begged and pleaded, made promises about taking care of everything himself, and even offered to give up his allowance for 6 months. Finally, his parents had agreed to this visit. The shelter volunteer, a kind woman named Mrs. Peterson, with silver hair and twinkling eyes, led them through the main entrance. The sound hit Max immediately, a chorus of barks, whines, and the occasional meow from the cat section. His eyes widened as they walked down the first corridor lined with kennels. "Now, what kind of dog were you thinking about?" Mrs. Peterson asked, pulling out a clipboard. "We have some wonderful puppies that just came in, and several adult dogs who would love a family." Max's parents began discussing practical matters, size, temperament, good with children. But Max had already wandered ahead. He stopped abruptly in front of a kennel about halfway down the corridor. Inside sat a medium-sized dog with a coat that seemed to shimmer between gold and brown, like autumn leaves in sunlight. The dog had intelligent amber eyes and wore an expression that seemed almost human in its hopefulness. "What about this one?" Max called out, his voice cracking with emotion he didn't quite understand. Mrs. Peterson joined him, consulting her clipboard. "Ah, that's Scout. He's about 2 years old, part golden retriever, part German shepherd. He was found wandering the highway about 3 weeks ago. No collar, no microchip. We think someone might have abandoned him, but he's the gentlest soul you could imagine." As if understanding he was being discussed, Scout stood up and approached the kennel door. He didn't bark or jump like some of the other dogs had when they'd walked by. Instead, he simply sat down and looked directly at Max, tilting his head slightly to one side. Max's father, Robert, joined them. "He seems calm," he observed, though Max could hear the reservation in his voice. "But he's pretty big. Are you sure you could handle walking a dog that size, son?" "I could handle it, Dad. I know I could." Max knelt down so he was at Scout's eye level. The dog moved closer to the kennel door, and Max noticed a small scar above his left eye. Nothing serious, but it gave Scout a distinguished look, like a wise old warrior. "Can we meet him? Outside the kennel, I mean?" Max asked Mrs. Peterson. "Of course. We have a nice play area out back. Let me get Scout's leash." 5 minutes later, they were in a fenced yard behind the shelter. Scout trotted out calmly on his leash, no pulling or dragging, and immediately went to Max. He sniffed the boy's outstretched hand politely, then sat down beside him as if they'd known each other for years. "Well, I'll be," Mrs. Peterson murmured. "Scout's been pretty reserved with most visitors. He seems to really like you, Max." Max's mother knelt down and let Scout sniff her hand as well. The dog's tail began to wag, not frantically, but with a steady, contented rhythm. When she scratched behind his ears, Scout leaned into her touch and made a soft, happy sound. "He's been house-trained," Mrs. Peterson continued, "knows basic commands, and according to the vet, he's in perfect health, except for being slightly underweight. Whoever had him before did a good job with his training, which makes his abandonment all the more puzzling." Robert remained the holdout, asking practical questions about food costs, veterinary bills, and time commitments. But Max could see his father's resolve weakening every time Scout looked at him with those soulful amber eyes. The turning point came when a sudden gust of autumn wind sent Max's baseball cap flying across the yard.
Before anyone could react, Scout bounded after it, caught it gently in his mouth without leaving a single tooth mark, and brought it back to Max, sitting politely to present it. "Good boy," Max said, his voice full of wonder as he took the cap. Scout's tail wagged harder, and he nuzzled Max's hand. Robert and Sarah exchanged a look, one of those wordless conversations that married couples have perfected over years together. "The adoption fee is $75, Mrs. Peterson said quietly, sensing the shift in the family's mood. That includes his shots, neutering, and a microchip. "Can we afford it?" Max asked, looking between his parents with hope and anxiety warring in his expression. "We can manage it," his father said slowly. "But Max, this is a huge responsibility. Dogs live for 10 to 15 years. That means Scout would be with us through your high school graduation, maybe through college. Are you really ready for that kind of commitment?" Max looked down at Scout, who was now lying contentedly at his feet, chin resting on his paws, but eyes still alert and watching. Something deep in Max's chest seemed to settle into place, like a puzzle piece finding its perfect fit. "Yes," he said, and there was no hesitation in his voice. "I'm ready." The car ride home was an adventure in itself. Scout sat in the back seat next to Max, looking out the window with what appeared to be fascination at his new neighborhood. He was remarkably well behaved for a dog who'd been cooped up in a shelter kennel, showing none of the car sickness or anxiety Mrs. Peterson had warned them might occur. The Henderson family lived in a modest 2-story house on Maple Street, with a decent-sized backyard that was perfectly fenced, a detail that had factored heavily into Robert's final decision. It wasn't the biggest house on the block, but it was home, with Sarah's flower gardens in front and Robert's vegetable patch in the back. Max's younger sister Emma, who was 7, came running out the front door the moment she heard the car in the driveway. She'd been bouncing off the walls with excitement ever since her parents had called to tell her they were bringing Scout home. "Is that him? Is that really him?" Emma practically shouted, pressing her face against the car window before they'd even come to a complete stop. Scout's ears perked up at the sound of her voice, and his tail began its steady wag again. When Max opened the car door, Scout stepped out carefully and immediately went to Emma, sitting politely in front of her as if presenting himself for inspection. Emma was enchanted. "He's so pretty and so soft." She ran her small hands through Scout's fur, and the dog closed his eyes contentedly. "Gentle, Emma," Sarah cautioned. "Remember what we talked about. Dogs need time to adjust to new places and new people." But Scout seemed to be adjusting remarkably well. He followed the family into the house, taking everything in with calm curiosity. Max had spent the morning preparing, setting up food and water bowls in the kitchen, arranging a dog bed in the corner of his own bedroom, and even hanging up a new leash by the front door. "Want to see your new room?" Max asked Scout, as if the dog could understand every word. And perhaps he could, because Scout followed Max upstairs without hesitation. Max's bedroom was typical for a 10-year-old. Baseball posters on the walls, a desk cluttered with homework and comics, a bookshelf stuffed with adventure novels and science books. The dog bed looked a bit out of place among the boyhood chaos, but Scout went directly to it, circled once, and lay down as if he'd been sleeping there for years. "I guess you like it?" Max grinned. That first evening established what would become their routine. After dinner, Max took Scout for a walk around the neighborhood. Scout walked perfectly on the leash, neither pulling ahead nor lagging behind, stopping politely when Max stopped to talk to neighbors who were curious about the new addition to the Henderson family. Mrs. Chen from next door was particularly taken with Scout. "What a handsome dog," she said, offering her hand for Scout to sniff. "Very well-mannered. You're lucky to find such a good boy." "His name is Scout," Max announced proudly. "We got him from the animal shelter today." "Scout," Mrs. Chen repeated, smiling. "That's a perfect name for him. He looks like he's always watching, always aware of what's happening around him." Max thought that was a particularly astute observation. Scout did seem unusually alert and intelligent, even for a dog breed known for being smart. Throughout their walk, Scouts had constantly moved, taking in every sight, sound, and smell. But it wasn't nervous alertness. It was more like the attention of a dedicated guardian, making sure everything was as it should be. When they returned home, Scout followed Max to his room for homework time. While Max struggled through math problems and wrote a report about the solar system, Scout lay on his bed nearby, occasionally lifting his head when he heard sounds from other parts of the house. Sarah working in the kitchen, Robert watching the news, Emma playing with her dolls in the living room. Bedtime brought the first real test. Max had assumed Scout would sleep on the dog bed, but when he climbed into his own bed and turned off the lights, Scout stood up and approached the side of the bed with a soft whine. "What is it, boy?" Max whispered. Scout put his front paws up on the mattress and looked at Max hopefully. "I don't know if Mom and Dad would like you sleeping on the bed," Max said uncertainly. Scout's tail wagged once, and he made another soft sound, not quite a whine, more like a gentle request. Max considered for about 30 seconds before scooting over and patting the mattress. "Okay, but just for tonight, while you get used to everything." Scout jumped up gracefully and settled down next to Max, careful not to take up too much space. The warmth and steady breathing of the dog beside him was surprisingly comforting. Max had been a bit nervous about having a dog in his room. What if Scout barked at night or got restless or had an accident? But Scout simply curled up and went to sleep, and Max found himself drifting off faster than he had in months. He woke up once during the night to find Scout sitting up, ears perked and alert, looking toward the bedroom door. Max listened but couldn't hear anything unusual, just the normal sounds of an old house settling, maybe a car passing by outside. "What is it?" Max whispered. Scout looked at him, then back toward the door, then seemed to decide everything was fine. He lay back down and went to sleep. Max would later remember that moment as the first sign of what made Scout truly special, though at the time he thought nothing of it. Over the following weeks, Scout settled into the Henderson household as if he'd always belonged there. He developed individual relationships with each family member, somehow sensing exactly what each person needed from him. With Max, he was the perfect companion. Playful when Max wanted to play, calm when Max needed quiet time for homework, and always ready for adventures. They established a routine of walking to school together each morning. Scout would return home with Sarah after dropping Max off, and another longer walk each evening after dinner. With Emma, Scout was incredibly gentle and patient. When she wanted to play dress-up, Scout would sit still while she tied ribbons around his neck or placed her doll-sized hats on his head. When she had nightmares, Scout seemed to sense it even from Max's room and would pad down the hall to sit outside Emma's door until she felt safe again. With Sarah, Scout was a helpful companion around the house. He followed her from room to room as she did housework, never getting underfoot but always present. When she worked in her garden, Scout would lie in the shade nearby, occasionally getting up to investigate something that had caught his attention. But it was with Robert that Scout's behavior was most interesting. Max's father had been the most reluctant about getting a dog, worried about the responsibility and expense. Yet Scout seemed to determine to win him over. Every evening when Robert came home from his job at the hardware store, Scout would greet him at the door with a tennis ball, inviting him to play fetch in the backyard. At first, Robert would only throw the ball a few times before heading inside, but gradually he found himself spending longer periods outside with Scout.
"That dog has good instincts," Robert admitted to Sarah one evening as they watched Scout and Max playing in the backyard. "He seems to know exactly what each of us needs." Scout's intelligence became more apparent every day. He learned the family's routines quickly and seemed to anticipate their needs. He knew that Saturday mornings meant pancakes and that he might get a small piece if he sat politely by Emma's chair. He understood that when Sarah got out the vacuum cleaner, he should go lie on his bed upstairs until she was finished. He even learned to distinguish between different types of visitors, greeting friends enthusiastically but positioning himself protectively when strangers came to the door. Max loved showing off Scout's intelligence to his friends. Scout knew dozens of commands beyond the basic sit, stay, and come. He could shake hands, roll over, play dead, and even fetch specific items by name. When Max said, "Scout, get my baseball glove," Scout would trot to Max's room and return with the correct item. "How did you teach him all that so fast?" Max's best friend Jake asked one afternoon as they watched Scout demonstrate his repertoire of tricks. "I don't think I really taught him," Max admitted. "It's like he already knew most of it and just needed to learn the words we use." Mrs. Peterson from the animal shelter had been right about Scout's mysterious past. Everything about the dog suggested he'd been well-loved and well-trained before ending up alone on that highway. Max sometimes wondered about Scout's previous family and what had happened to separate them, but those thoughts never lasted long. Scout was his now, and that was all that mattered. The bond between boy and dog deepened with each passing day. They developed their own form of communication that went beyond words and commands. Scout seemed to understand Max's moods instinctively, offering comfort when Max was sad, excitement when Max was happy, and calm presence when Max was worried about a test or anxious about something at school. Max discovered that having Scout made everything in life better. Bad days at school became bearable because he knew Scout would be waiting at home, ready to listen to Max's troubles without judgment. Good days became even better when shared with Scout's infectious joy in simple pleasures like walks, playing fetch, or just lying in the sun. One evening in November, about 6 weeks after Scout had joined the family, Max was doing homework at his desk while Scout dozed on the bed nearby. Max was struggling with a particularly difficult science assignment about weather patterns when he heard Scout's breathing change. He looked over to see Scout sitting up, ears forward, staring intently at the bedroom window. Max listened, but heard nothing unusual. "What is it, boy?" Scout continued staring out the window for several minutes, then slowly relaxed and lay back down. But Max noticed that Scout positioned himself differently this time, closer to the door and in a way that would let him see both the window and the hallway. "You're a good watchdog," Max said affectionately, reaching over to pet Scout's head. "But I think everything's okay." Scout's tail wagged once in acknowledgement, but he maintained his alert positioning. It was another small moment that Max would remember later, when he understood the full extent of Scout's protective instincts. December brought an early winter to their small town, with heavy snows that blanketed Maple Street and turned the Hendersons' backyard into a winter wonderland. Max loved playing in the snow with Scout, who seemed to enjoy the cold weather even more than the autumn days. Scout would bound through the snowdrifts nose first, emerging with his face covered in white powder and his tail wagging with pure delight. But December also brought something else to the neighborhood, something far less pleasant than snow. It started with small things that nobody thought much about at first. Mrs. Chen mentioned that someone had gone through her mailbox, leaving letters scattered on the ground. The Johnsons, who lived 3 houses down, found their garbage cans knocked over 2 mornings in a row. Old Mr. Martinez reported that he'd seen someone walking through his backyard at night, though when he called out, the person had run away. "Probably just teenagers causing mischief," Robert said when Sarah mentioned the incidents over dinner one evening. "You know how kids get restless during winter break?" But Max noticed that Scout had become more vigilant lately. During their evening walks, Scout would stop frequently, ears forward, staring into shadows or down empty streets. His behavior wasn't fearful. Scout never seemed afraid of anything, but it was definitely more alert than usual. One night, Max woke up to find Scout standing at the window bedroom, perfectly still and silent.
The dog's posture was tense, every muscle coiled and ready. Max slipped out of bed and joined Scout at the window, looking out at the snow-covered street. At first, he didn't see anything unusual. The streetlights cast their normal pools of orange light, and the parked cars sat under their blankets of snow like sleeping animals. But then Max caught a movement, just a shadow shifting between the trees across the street. "Is someone out there?" Max whispered the Scout. Scout made a barely audible sound deep in his throat, not quite a growl, but clearly a warning. They watched for several more minutes, but the shadow didn't reappear. The next morning, Max found footprints in the snow that definitely hadn't been there when they'd gone to bed. The prints led from the street, across their front lawn, around the side of the house, and into the backyard. They were too large to belong to a child, and they didn't match any of the boot patterns Max recognized from his family members. "Dad, you need to see this." Robert examined the footprints with a frown. "That's odd," he muttered. "Sarah, did you go outside last night for any reason?"
"No, and I don't recognize those boot prints," Sarah replied, wrapping her robe tighter against the cold morning air. Robert followed the trail of prints around the house. They led to several windows, the kitchen window, the living room window, and one of the basement windows. At each stop, the snow was more disturbed, as if someone had spent time looking inside. "I'm calling the police," Robert said grimly. Officer Martinez, no relation to their elderly neighbor, arrived within an hour. He was a young policeman with a kind face who took their report seriously, photographing the footprints and examining the windows that had been peered into. "We've had several reports of prowler activity in this neighborhood over the past couple of weeks. So far, it's just been trespassing and minor property damage, but we're definitely concerned. Have you noticed anything else unusual? Any strangers hanging around? Unfamiliar vehicles parked on your street?" Max spoke up. "Scout, that's our dog. He's been acting different lately. More alert, like he knows something's wrong." Officer Martinez nodded seriously. "Dogs often pick up on things we miss. They have better hearing and sense of smell, and they're naturally protective of their territory and families. I'd trust your dog's instincts." He advised them to keep doors and windows locked, install additional lighting around the house, and call immediately if they noticed any more suspicious activity. After Officer Martinez left, the family held a meeting in the living room. Scout lay at Max's feet, but Max noticed his ears were constantly moving, tracking every sound from outside. "I don't want to scare anyone, but we need to be more careful until the police catch whoever's been causing trouble. No one goes outside alone after dark, and we all need to pay attention to anything unusual." "What if the person tries to break in?" Emma asked, her voice small with worry. "That's not going to happen," Sarah assured her. "We have good locks, and we'll be extra careful. Plus, we have Scout," Max added, reaching down to pet his dog. Scout looked up at him with those intelligent amber eyes, and Max felt a surge of confidence. He'll protect us. Robert started to say something about not expecting too much from a dog, but then he looked at Scout, really looked at him. The dog was alert and calm, but there was something in his posture that suggested he was ready for anything. Robert found himself feeling more secure than he had expected. That night, Scout didn't even attempt to sleep. He stationed himself by Max's bedroom door, where he could see down the hallway toward the stairs and also keep watch over Max. Every few hours, he would make a quiet patrol around the house, padding silently from room to room, checking windows and doors. Max dozed fitfully, waking several times to find Scout in different positions, sometimes at the window, sometimes at the door, always vigilant. It should have been unsettling,
But somehow Scout's presence made Max feel safer, not more worried. Around 3 in the morning, Scout's behavior changed dramatically. He went rigid, ears pointed straight up, and a low growl rumbled from his chest. Max sat up instantly, suddenly wide awake.
"What is it?" Max whispered. Scout moved to the window and stood perfectly still, staring out into the night. Max joined him and felt his blood run cold. There was definitely someone in their backyard, a dark figure moving slowly around the perimeter of the house, testing windows and doors. Max crept to his parents' bedroom and gently shook his father awake. "Dad," he whispered urgently, "someone's outside. Scout saw them first." Robert was alert immediately, slipping out of bed without waking Sarah. He and Max returned to Max's room where Scout was still maintaining his watch at the window. "I see him," Robert breathed. "He's trying the back door now." They watched as the figure jiggled the handle of the sliding glass door that led from the kitchen to the deck. When that didn't work, the person moved to the basement window. "I'm calling 911, Robert breathed. But as he turned toward the hallway, Scout suddenly erupted into the most ferocious barking Max had ever heard. The sound was like thunder in the quiet house, deep and threatening and absolutely unmistakable in its message. "Danger! Intruder! Stay away!" The effect was immediate. The figure in the backyard froze for a split second, then bolted toward the back fence, scrambling over it and disappearing into the night. Scout's barking woke the entire household. Sarah came running down the hall, Emma close behind her, both looking frightened and confused. "What's happening?" Sarah demanded. "Someone was trying to break in," Robert explained, already dialing 911. "Scout scared them off." Emma ran to Scout and threw her arms around his neck. "Good dog, good Scout." Scout accepted his praise calmly, but his ears remained alert, still listening for any sign that the intruder might return. The police arrived quickly this time, 2 officers who took the attempted break-in very seriously. They searched the backyard with flashlights, found fresh footprints in the snow, and discovered that someone had indeed tried to pry open the basement window. "Your dog probably saved you from a burglary, maybe worse. Dogs are better than any alarm system. They can't be disabled or bypassed." As the police finished their investigation and left, the Henderson family gathered in the living room. It was nearly 5 in the morning, but nobody felt like going back to sleep. "I think we should get Scout a special treat," Emma announced. "He's a hero." Max looked at Scout, who was lying calmly at his feet as if nothing unusual had happened. "He is a hero," Max agreed, his voice full of pride and gratitude. But Max had a feeling this wasn't over yet. Scout's continuing alertness suggested the dog thought so too. "What's all the noise about?" she asked. "We need to go downstairs with Mrs. Rodriguez," Max said, trying to keep his voice calm. "Right now." As they headed back downstairs, Max heard a sound that made his blood freeze. Someone was trying to force open the sliding glass door in the kitchen. The lock was holding, but barely. Scout heard it too. He positioned himself at the bottom of the stairs, facing toward the kitchen, and began a low, continuous growl that seemed to vibrate through the entire house. Mrs. Rodriguez had gotten through to 911 and was speaking quickly but clearly to the dispatcher. "Yes, there are definitely multiple intruders trying to break into the house. No, the homeowners aren't here. Yes, there are children." A loud crash from the kitchen interrupted her. Someone had broken the glass in the sliding door. Scout exploded into action. His barking was even more fierce than it had been during the previous attempted break-in, and he charged toward the kitchen. Max heard shouts from outside, and the sound of running feet. "Stay here with Emma," Mrs. Rodriguez told Max, then surprised him by grabbing a heavy flashlight from the kitchen counter and following Scout. Max could hear multiple voices now, at least 3 different men, and they sounded angry and desperate rather than simply opportunistic. These weren't random burglars looking for easy targets. This felt personal, directed specifically at the Henderson family.
Scout's barking continued, punctuated by the sounds of struggle and more shouting. Max desperately wanted to help, but he also knew he needed to protect Emma. "I'm scared," Emma whispered, clinging to Max's arm. "It's okay," Max told her, though his own heart was pounding. "Scout won't let anything happen to us." Through the chaos, Max could hear Mrs. Rodriguez shouting, "The police are on their way! Get out of this house right now!" But the intruders weren't leaving. If anything, the sounds of struggle were getting closer, moving from the kitchen toward the living room where Max and Emma were hidden behind the couch. Scout's barking suddenly changed pitch, becoming higher and more urgent. Max heard Mrs. Rodriguez cry out, and then a man's voice, rough and angry, "Shut that dog up!" Max made a decision that would have made his parents proud and terrified them at the same time. He told Emma to hide in the closet under the stairs, then grabbed his baseball bat from the hall closet and crept toward the kitchen. What he saw made him understand why Scout had been so vigilant for weeks. These weren't random criminals. They knew the Henderson family's routines, knew when the parents would be out, and had come prepared for a specific purpose. One man was rifling through Robert's desk, where he kept important papers, while another was disconnecting the family computer. The third was trying to fend off Scout with a chair. Mrs. Rodriguez was on the floor near the phone, conscious but dazed. She must have tried to stop them and been pushed aside. Scout was magnificent. Despite being outnumbered 3-1, despite the men's attempts to intimidate him with shouts and threatening gestures, he held his ground. He moved constantly, preventing any of the intruders from approaching the stairs, where he knew Max and Emma were hiding. But Max could see that Scout was tiring, and the men were getting more aggressive. One of them produced what looked like a wooden club and was trying to corner Scout. That's when Max stepped into view, baseball bat in his hands. "Get away from my dog," he said, his voice shaking but determined. The men turned, surprised to see him. "Kid, get back upstairs and stay out of this," one of them growled. "No," Max said. "This is my house, and you need to leave." Scout used the distraction to position himself between Max and the intruders, and Max could see the intelligence and love in the dog's eyes. Scout was coordinating with him, protecting him while still maintaining his own defensive position. The sound of sirens in the distance changed everything. The men looked at each other with panic and headed for the broken door. "This isn't over," one of them snarled as they fled. But it was over, at least for that night. The police arrived to find Max and Scout standing guard over Mrs. Rodriguez and Emma, and the intruders long gone into the night. The police investigation revealed something that shocked everyone. The break-in attempts hadn't been random crimes of opportunity. Robert Henderson, in his job as manager of the local hardware store, had apparently witnessed something months earlier, a conversation between two men planning what sounded like illegal activities. He'd reported it to the police, not thinking much of it at the time. But those men had been part of a larger criminal organization that was now under investigation, and they decided Robert might be a threat to their operations. The break-ins had been attempts to find information about what Robert knew and what he'd told the police. "Your dog probably saved your family from something much worse than burglary," Detective Williams explained to the Hendersons the next day. These weren't petty criminals. They were dangerous people who felt threatened by what your husband might have overheard. Max looked at Scout, who was lying calmly beside his chair as if the previous night's heroism were all in a day's work for a family dog. How did Scout know they were different from regular burglars? Dogs can sense things we can't. They pick up on body language, scent markers, behavioral patterns. Your Scout probably knew from their first scouting visits that these men meant serious harm to your family.
The detective went on to explain that the men had been watching the house for weeks, learning the family's routines and waiting for the right opportunity. Scout's vigilant behavior had been his response to sensing the ongoing threat. Mrs. Rodriguez, who had spent the night in the hospital for observation but was thankfully uninjured, visited that afternoon. "That dog of yours is remarkable," she told the family. "When those men broke in, Scout positioned himself to protect the children first, then me, then the house itself. He was thinking tactically, like a trained guard dog." "But he's not a trained guard dog," Sarah pointed out. "He's just Scout." Max had been quiet through most of these conversations, processing everything that had happened. Finally, he spoke up. "I think Scout's special," he said simply. "Not just smart or well-trained. Really special, like he was meant to be with our family." Robert, who had been the most skeptical about getting a dog in the first place, knelt down and looked Scout directly in the eyes. "You saved my family," he said quietly. "I don't know how you knew what was coming, but you did, and you kept them safe until help could arrive." Scout's tail wagged once, and he leaned into Robert's touch when the man scratched behind his ears. 3 days after the break-in, Mrs. Peterson from the animal shelter called with news that would explain everything about Scout's remarkable abilities. "Max," Sarah called, "Mrs. Peterson is on the phone. She says she has some information about Scout that we need to hear." The family gathered around the kitchen phone as Sarah put the call on speaker. "I've been doing some research since I heard about what happened at your house. Scout's behavior sounded so unusual that I contacted police departments in surrounding counties to see if anyone was missing a dog matching his description." Max felt a sudden stab of fear. What if Scout's original family wanted him back? "What I found was fascinating," Mrs. Peterson continued. "About 6 months ago, there was a car accident about 30 miles from here. A family was traveling when their car went off the road during a storm. The father was a retired police officer who worked with canine units, and he had been training his personal dog for search and rescue work." Max's heart began to race as he realized where this story was leading. The family survived the accident, but they were injured and had to move out of state to live with relatives while they recovered. In the chaos of the accident and the medical emergency, their dog ran off and was never found. They searched for weeks, but finally had to leave without him. Sarah gasped. "Scout?" The description matches perfectly. More importantly, the training explains everything. Scout wasn't just a family pet. He was being trained as a search and rescue dog by someone who understood how to develop his natural protective instincts and intelligence. Max felt a complex mix of emotions. He was amazed to learn about Scout's background, but worried about what it might mean for their family. The family wants to know that their dog is safe and well cared for, but they're not in a position to take him back. The father is still recovering from his injuries and can't continue Scout's training. They just want to know he found a good home. "What was his name?" Max asked quietly. "Before he was Scout." "Ranger," Mrs. Peterson replied. "But the family said they'd be happy to know he has a new name and a new family who loves him." After they hung up, the Henderson family sat in thoughtful silence for a few minutes. Scout seemed to sense the serious mood and came to sit beside Max's chair. "So you're really special," Max said, stroking Scout's head. "You were being trained to save people, and then you ended up saving us." Emma had a different perspective. "Maybe he wasn't lost," she said, with the simple wisdom that sometimes comes from children. "Maybe he was looking for us. Maybe he knew we needed him." Robert smiled and ruffled Emma's hair. "Maybe you're right, sweetheart." The next few weeks brought wonderful changes to the Henderson household. With the criminal organization under investigation and several arrests made, the immediate danger to their family was over. But the experience had brought them all closer together and given them a new appreciation for the special dog who had become so much more than a pet. Scout seemed to settle into a more relaxed routine now that the threat had passed. He still maintained his protective awareness, but the constant vigilance was replaced by a calmer, more contented demeanor. He had done his job, he had kept his family safe, and now he could simply enjoy being loved. Max's relationship with Scout deepened even further. Knowing about Scout's background helped Max understand that their bond was built on more than just boy and dog affection. Scout had chosen to protect the Henderson family with skills and instincts that had been carefully developed by someone who understood the full potential of his intelligence and loyalty. He could have been a famous search and rescue dog, Max told his friend Jake one afternoon as they watched Scout demonstrate some of his more advanced skills in the backyard. He could have saved lots of people and been on TV and everything. But instead, he saved your family. That's pretty cool too. Max considered this and realized Jake was absolutely right. Scout hadn't just saved them from the break-in. He'd brought them together as a family in ways they'd never experienced before. The shared experience of being protected by Scout's dedication and intelligence had created bonds between all of them that would last forever. Robert had become Scout's most devoted fan, spending hours each evening playing with him and teaching him new tricks. "I never understood before," he told Sarah one evening as they watched Max and Scout play fetch in the snow. "I thought a dog was just a responsibility, an expense. I didn't realize a dog could be a real member of the family." Emma had started volunteering at the animal shelter, inspired by their experience with Scout, to help other abandoned animals find loving homes. There are so many dogs like Scout out there, dogs with amazing potential who just need someone to give them a chance. Emma had appointed herself Scout's personal care coordinator, making sure his food and water bowls were always full, brushing his fur every day, and creating a collection of handmade toys that Scout politely pretended to enjoy. Spring arrived early that year, melting the snow and revealing the first green shoots of Sarah's flower garden. Max and Scout spent long hours outdoors, making up for the months of being confined inside during the dangerous winter period. On Scout's first anniversary with the Henderson family, Max had declared October 15th to be Scout's official adoption day. They held a celebration that would have seemed ridiculous to them a year earlier, but now felt like the most natural thing in the world. Sarah baked a special dog-safe cake made with peanut butter and carrots. Emma made a banner that read, "Happy Adoption Day, Scout," in colorful letters. Robert surprised everyone by presenting Scout with a beautiful new collar engraved with Scout Henderson, hero and family member. But Max's gift was the most meaningful. He had been working on it in secret for weeks, with help from his art teacher at school. It was a scrapbook documenting Scout's first year with their family, filled with photos, drawings, and written memories of all their adventures together. The last page contained a letter Max had written to Scout. "Dear Scout, I know you can't read this, but maybe you'll understand anyway, because you seem to understand everything else. A year ago, I wanted a dog because I thought it would be fun to have a pet. I didn't know I was getting a best friend, a protector, and a hero, all in one. You saved our family, but you did more than that. You made us a better family. You taught me that love isn't just about feeling happy, it's about being willing to protect the people you care about, even when it's scary or difficult. You show us every day what loyalty really means. You never complain about walking in the rain or getting up early or staying alert when you'd rather be sleeping.
You just do what needs to be done because you love us. I promise to always take care of you the way you take care of us. I promise to make sure you have everything you need and lots of things you just want. I promise to never take for granted how lucky we are to have you. You're not just our dog, Scout. You're our guardian angel with 4 paws and a tail. Love always, Max. P.S. Emma wanted me to tell you that you're the best dog in the whole world. And Dad wanted me to tell you thank you for keeping us safe. And Mom wanted me to tell you that you have the softest ears she's ever petted. As Max read the letter aloud, Scout sat beside him, alert and attentive as always, but with a peaceful contentment in his amber eyes that hadn't been there during those dangerous winter months. When Max finished reading the letter, Scout did something he'd never done before. He stood up, placed his front paws gently on Max's shoulders, and touched his nose to Max's forehead, a gesture so clearly affectionate and deliberate that everyone watching understood they were witnessing something special. "He's saying thank you," Emma whispered. "No," Max said, his voice thick with emotion as he wrapped his arms around Scout's neck. "He's saying you're welcome, for giving him a family to protect and love."
5 years later, Max was 15 and Scout was showing some gray around his muzzle, but their bond remained as strong as ever. Scout had never faced another threat as serious as that winter night when he'd protected the family from dangerous intruders, but he'd continued to be their faithful guardian through all the normal challenges of life. He'd been there when Emma broke her arm falling from her bike, staying beside her hospital bed until she was ready to come home. He'd comforted Max through the anxiety of middle school social pressures and the disappointment of not making the baseball team his first year trying out. He'd supported Sarah through her mother's illness and death, seeming to understand when quiet presence was more valuable than playful energy. The Henderson family had grown too. They'd fostered 3 other dogs over the years, helping them find permanent homes, inspired by their experience with Scout to give back to the animal rescue community. Scout had been a patient teacher to each of the foster dogs, showing them how to be good family members and demonstrating that there was enough love in the Henderson household for everyone. Max was old enough now to understand that Scout wouldn't be with them forever. Dogs' lives are shorter than human lives, and even the most special dogs eventually grow old. But he also understood that the lessons Scout had taught them about loyalty, protection, unconditional love, and what it really means to be family would last long beyond Scout's lifetime. On quiet evenings, when Scout was content to lie beside Max's chair while Max did homework, Max would sometimes think back to that October morning at the animal shelter when he'd first seen Scout sitting patiently in his kennel, waiting for someone to choose him. "I thought I was picking you," Max would whisper to Scout on these occasions. "But really, you were picking us, weren't you? You were choosing our family to protect and love." Scout would always respond to these moments with that same steady, loving gaze that had captured Max's heart 5 years earlier. And in those amber eyes, Max could see the truth that every pet owner eventually discovers, that the love between a person and their dog is one of the purest forms of devotion that exists in the world. The Henderson family had learned that heroes don't always wear capes or badges. Sometimes they wear fur coats and have 4 paws and wet noses. Sometimes they come from animal shelters carrying mysterious pasts and uncertain futures. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, they choose your family to love and protect with a loyalty that knows no limits. Scout had given the Hendersons the greatest gift any dog can give to any family. He had shown them what unconditional love looks like in action. He had taught them that being family isn't just about sharing a house or a name, it's about being willing to put each other's safety and happiness before your own, no matter what the cost. And in return, the Henderson family had given Scout what every abandoned dog dreams of, a forever home where he was valued not just as a pet, but as a true member of the family, whose courage and devotion would be remembered and celebrated for all the years to come. As Max grew older and eventually went to college, as Emma became a teenager and then a young woman, as Robert and Sarah aged gracefully together, Scout remained the heart of their family story. The 4-legged guardian angel who had taught them all what it really means to love someone enough to keep them safe. And though Scout's story would eventually reach its natural end, as all dog stories must,
The love he had brought into their lives would continue forever, passed down through the generations of Hendersons who would grow up hearing the tale of the remarkable dog who had saved their family, and in doing so had shown them the very best of what loyalty and love can accomplish. Sometimes the greatest adventures don't involve traveling to distant lands or facing mythical creatures. Sometimes they happen right in your own backyard, with a loyal dog by your side and a family worth protecting. And sometimes, that's more than enough to create a story worth telling for the rest of your life.